Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Rebecca Naden. I'm the Head of Global Risks and Resilience at the Overseas Development Institute, a policy think tank based in London. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here today to join our event on nature-based solutions, IUCN Global Standards and Prospects in Russia, hosted by the British Embassy Beijing. British Embassy Moscow. It's because I was many years in the British Embassy Beijing. Working with nature and biodiversity is absolutely critical part of the climate solutions, but barriers do remain. For example, we really need to improve the uptake and awareness of MBS amongst policymakers, business leaders and citizens. Also, market mechanisms, regulation and governance structures need to be strengthened if we are to achieve the scale of implementation required to tackle the climate crisis. And also, we need to increase the amount of both public and private finance. So today's event is going to touch upon some of these issues and explore them in the context of Russia. Before we start the event, I just want to remind everybody to please post questions in the chat. And also to download the Speak US app for the simultaneous translation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Her Majesty's Ambassador, who will give some introductory remarks.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon to everyone from Moscow. It's a great pleasure to open today's event on nature-based solutions. This is the last in a series of events to mark a year to go to COP26, the United Nations Climate Conference, which will take place in Glasgow in November 2021. We're convinced that COP26 will be a pivotal moment for the world to come together and agree ambitious steps to prevent the catastrophic warming of our planet, and to be on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. To stop this happening, every country needs to increase its commitment to reducing emissions and to aim for carbon neutrality by the middle of this century. So while COP26 is still a year away, we're using this series of events to be really clear that action on climate change can't wait, and that throughout our presidency, we will champion a clean, inclusive and resilient recovery from the impacts of COVID-19. We're working with governments and non-state actors to drive global progress in 5 key areas: energy, adaptation and resilience, clean transport, finance, and the theme of today's event, nature. As COP26 presidents, we're going to work with international partners to ensure that as we tackle climate change, we work to protect, restore and enhance nature too. That has to be an integral part of what we're doing. And nature-based solutions are essential in helping us to rebalance our relationship with the world around us. All of us need to do more on this. And of course, here in Russia, there's huge potential for a major contribution on nature-based solutions and on conservation. Russia has the world's largest boreal forest, with 20% of the world's boreal forests, peatlands, other carbon sinks, as well as really fantastic scientific expertise. So there's a lot that Russia can do, and there's a lot that Russia can contribute. Today, we're joined by several leading experts in this area from the UK and from Russia, who will help demystify this topic of nature-based solutions and explore the opportunities for their implementation here in Russia. And to start us off, I'm really delighted to introduce the UK Minister for Environment and Pacific, and a long-term advocate of work in this area, and a really strong supporter of the environment in the UK and across the world. So over to Lord Goldsmith to set out his thoughts on this vital issue.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So I just want to check you can hear me. It looks like, I think you can. Thank you, and thanks for those introductory remarks. I've been to Russia once in my life only, many years ago. Feels like decades ago. It probably wasn't quite so long, but I came to Moscow to interview Mikhail Gorbachev on these issues that we're discussing today, on international environmental issues. And in addition to being inspired by my interviewee, I've longed to return ever since. The Russian natural environment is really just breathtakingly vast and diverse. And unlike the UK, you have extraordinary wilderness teeming with life. You know, the magnificent Kamchatka brown bears on the Bering Straits, eastern imperial eagles in the Caucasus forest, freshwater seals at Lake Baikal. And I'm sure many of you, maybe all of you, saw the image that won this year's Wildlife Photographer of the Year just a few weeks ago, a majestic armored tiger marking her scent on the trunk of an ancient fir, captured by Sergei Goshkov, I hope I got his name correct, in his native Siberia. So when I deliver the routine expected platitude that I wish I was there in person, in this case, I can assure you I mean that. But it is nevertheless a pleasure to be speaking to you today about how protecting and conserving nature can help us solve really the biggest challenges that we face today. And if it weren't for the pandemic, today we would be in the midst of the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26 in Glasgow. We'd likely be reflecting on the success or otherwise of the UN Conference on Biological Diversity in Kunming as well. And that all seems like another age. And I think in many respects, it is another age. Tragically, over 1 million people have been killed by coronavirus. Every single economy has been utterly battered by the pandemic. But coronavirus is itself likely the consequence of our abusive relationship with nature. But it will be dwarfed by the impacts of environmental degradation and climate breakdown. A couple of months ago, we learned that populations of key species have declined by more than 2/3 in my lifetime, which from an evolutionary point of view wouldn't even qualify as a nanosecond. About 1 million species face extinction, and amongst them is a spoon-billed sandpiper that breeds in the Chukotka Peninsula, winters in Southeast Asia, and is supported by a conservation project at Slimbridge Wetlands here in the UK. And by the time I finish speaking to you, the world will have lost a staggering, appalling 300 football pitches worth of forest, cutting through the world's biodiversity and making deforestation a leading cause of climate change as well. You consider the Russian taiga, that's T-A-I-G-A, not the cat. In the last 20 years, Russia has lost 40 million hectares of tree cover. I mean, that's an area the size of the entire Komi Republic, or Sweden. It's the size of Sweden. Globally, 1 billion people rely directly on forests for their livelihoods, and invariably, it's the world's poorest who suffer first and worst when the free but rarely valued services that nature provides begin to fail. So what we're doing to the natural world makes as little sense ecologically as it does economically, and that makes turning this trajectory around the principle the most important challenge of our age. At the UN General Assembly in September, 78 world leaders signed the Pledge for Nature, including our own Prime Minister. They committed to take 10 urgent steps to reverse the decline of nature by 2030. They acknowledged the failures of so many previous declarations. They explicitly invited generations to come to judge leaders on the basis of whether or not they honor their word. And I'm proud that the UK was a leading voice in helping to toughen up and craft that pledge. And I sincerely hope Russia will join us soon, because we need to turn those undoubtedly powerful words into action. And for so many reasons, this coming year provides an opportunity for us to do so. At the COP26 in Glasgow, which we're hosting, we're determined to build on the success of the Paris Agreement and galvanize global action to tackle climate change. This coming December, just a few weeks from now, alongside France and the UN, we'll be hosting an ambition summit in partnership with Italy and Chile. We'll be asking countries to announce new commitments on net zero targets, on adaptation plans to mobilize at least $100 billion a year for developing countries. And at the Biodiversity COP in Kunming next year in China, we're going to press for ambitious targets to reverse biodiversity loss, underpinned by mechanisms for holding individual countries to account. And the thread that runs through all of that is nature. Yes, we will need to further the technological advance to get us through the low carbon transition. But I think we can be optimistic about that. It's striking that coal use fell faster under President Trump than it did under President Obama, despite the politics. Electric vehicles are on the cusp of overtaking the combustion engine. And who would have predicted that the cost of solar would have fallen 90% since the banking crisis just 12 years ago? But technology alone is not going to save us. It helps, it's important, but it's not going to save the day. And while there is a thriving and fast growing market for the clean tech revolution, that is not true of nature. It's still very much the case that even while we depend on them profoundly, completely, entirely, forests are today worth more when they're dead than when they're alive. Incentives to destroy forests are 40 times greater than incentives to protect them, and that needs to change. Nature-based solutions like protecting and restoring forests and peatlands, mangroves, could provide around a third of the most cost-effective climate change solution we need, while also helping nature recover and communities adapt to become more resilient. But despite their huge potential contribution, nature-based solutions attract a mere 3% of global climate finance, and that makes no sense at all. So the UK will use our presidency of COP to persuade other countries to put nature at the heart of their climate response, as we are doing in the UK. We've doubled our international climate finance. We will increase the proportion of that money that is spent on nature-based solutions. At home, we're introducing landmark legislation to reverse our own dramatic biodiversity loss. Internationally, we're rolling out ambitious programs on land and sea. For example, the new £500 million Blue Planet Fund to help protect marine ecosystems from climate change, marine pollution, overfishing, and habitat loss. Our Blue Belt program is on track to protect an area of ocean roughly the size of India around our British overseas territories. And we're leading a campaign to protect at least 30% of the world's ocean by 2030. And 30 countries have already signed up. And I implore Russia to join us. The effect of Russia doing so would be electrifying. But even if we succeed in persuading donor countries to increase their financial support for nature, we know that the task is too big for public money alone. So we also need governments to identify and then shift incentives they control in favor of sustainability. So for example, the $700 billion spent by the top 50 food producing countries on often destructive land use subsidies. We're replacing our own land use subsidies with a new system that rewards good stewardship of the land. If we can persuade others to do something similar and to work with us, we can, theoretically, we can flip the market in favor of sustainability. And because agriculture causes around 80% of global deforestation, much of it to grow commodities that we all use, we need to clean up our supply chains. Yesterday, the UK announced new plans to introduce a new due diligence requirement on big business to remove deforestation from their supply chains. And we intend to build a global alliance of countries, north, south, east, west, rich, poor, developed, developing, producer and consumer, to work together to clean global supply chains. The UK is absolutely committed to providing leadership, and we recognize that we have much, much more to do, but also that we can't do it alone. And it seems to me that Russia has a hugely important role to play. More than half the Arctic Ocean coastline is Russian. 1/5 of the world's freshwater resources are in Russia, and over 1/5 of the world's forests are in Russia. Peatlands cover 8% of the country, and I believe they're the largest such carbon sink in the world. Russia is blessed with extraordinary, expansive natural capital, and a source, I'm sure, of huge national pride, rightly so, but it needs protecting. Russia's forests are on track to become a net source of carbon dioxide by the middle of this century. And with the Arctic warming twice as fast as the rest of the world, the catastrophic oil spill in Norilsk, apologies for the pronunciation, this summer brought home the economic and ecological perils of the melting permafrost that covers almost 2/3 of the country. So taking care of these immense natural assets could be a game changer for reversing climate change and the decline of nature, to the benefit of Russian people, of course, but also to the benefit of the whole world. My view is that we have a duty now to every single generation to come to profoundly reset our relationship with this, the only planet that can sustain us. And whatever other issues may distract us or even divide us, we all depend on the same planet. We all depend on the same atmosphere. We're all part of ultimately the same extraordinarily complex natural web of life. So it seems to me that we have a responsibility to work better together. And I'm going to end on that note, and I look forward to the discussion. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lord Goldsmith, for that introduction. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker. As Lord Goldsmith highlighted, nature-based solutions only attract about 3% of climate finance. And actually focusing on standards, particularly global standards, is going to be key to attracting not only climate finance, but also private finance too. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Chris Buss, who is the director of the IUCN Forest Conservation Programme. Chris, over to you.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And I assume everyone can see my screen and hear me. Yes, thank you very much, distinguished guests and participants, for this opportunity to present more details on nature-based solutions. Thoroughly excited to be here and talking to a Russian audience. Actually, we talk of the delay of COP26, but also from an IUCN perspective, we've also postponed our World Conservation Congress. But at the one in Korea, I had a day flight back over Russia, and I sat by the window and stared out for the whole 8 hours, looking at the enormity of Russia, and have been fascinated ever since. And was fortunate also to oversee a program that IUCN had on the European Neighbourhood Partnership Initiative in Russia and Eastern Europe and the Caucasus, and I'm really excited to be here to realise to work with you all to realise the opportunities that Russia presents in relation to nature-based solutions. As well as the director of the IUCN Forest Programme, I actually also supporting as nature-based solutions advisor to the high-level champion Nigel Topping for COP26. So I come at this from both angles of specifically supporting non-state actors around COP26, but also from the perspective of IUCN and the nature-based solution standard. I think we all know the role of ecosystems, how ecosystems safeguard lives, livelihoods, whether it be coastal defences, flood regulation, carbon sequestration, water regulation. There's a suite of benefits and functions that ecosystems play in our lives. But I think what is critical and is that the scale that we now need to work at in relation to using those ecosystems, one as protecting them, but also using them to our advantage and providing the solutions that nature can provide to some of these global challenges. And the WWF report of global risks over the next 10 years is to me is a fascinating and critical slide for us all to absorb in relation to the key risks. 7 out of these 10 risks are where nature is either threatened or nature plays a key role in providing various solutions, whether it be in climate change, reversing biodiversity loss, the role and function in planetary forces of nature, water crisis, natural disasters, human-made environmental. Nature plays a critical role in there. And then on the right-hand side, we have infectious diseases, as Lord Goldsmith referred to. What is the role of nature and the threat to nature? And we put those in context of global risks. 7 out of 10 of the global risks to the global economy are coming from either threats to nature, but also playing where nature can play a significant solution. The figure on the bottom: 37% of climate mitigation from nature-based solutions can help us reach the climate change goals, but not only just our climate change goals, but also reducing societal challenges such as flood damages, reducing flood damage by 57 billion from that estimated for mangroves in China, India, Mexico, the US and Vietnam, the 170 billion of global benefits annually from ecosystem services. It provides an incredible opportunity for us to use nature to help deliver climate change mitigation and adaptation solutions, reduce disaster risk reduction, human health, economic and social development, food security, water security, reverse degradation and biodiversity loss. Nature is critical for us to be at the centre of providing various solutions, and we at IUCN have been driving with our members, with our 1,400 members, our state members, our non-governmental organisations, our Indigenous peoples membership, of defining nature-based solutions. What does nature-based solutions mean when we're using ecosystem-based approaches to deliver those societal challenges that I just mentioned, that ultimately provide not only biodiversity benefits, but also human well-being. So they're defined as actions to protect, sustainably manage, restore natural or modified ecosystems to address those climate change, food, water security, and adapting and providing those benefits that I mentioned. Really, as I think a no regret, a win-win solution for us all to integrate nature-based solutions into our strategies to address climate change, but also much more broader fundamental economic behavior and economic growth strategies. But it's not anything new. I think it's what is so exciting with the UK government, that nature and nature-based solutions has been put up as one of the 5 key pillars of its approach to COP26. Also facilitating those links into the Convention for Biological Diversity. But there's a suite of work and a suite of implementation. I've done a lot of work on forest landscape restoration over the last 10-15 years, and that was a key critical nature-based solution that we've been working on: restoring land health, restoring land productivity, restoring biodiversity. And what's been fascinating in that nature-based solutions work has been that a lot of money has come from climate change, but the countries are driving it through different reasons, whether it be for restoring land health, whether it be for restoring, for delivering their economic growth strategies, whether helping them deliver elements of their SDGs. So there's a vast range of knowledge and understanding around nature-based solutions and how we deliver that to help us deliver our NDCs, adapt to climate change, build, strengthen infrastructure, etc. So, as has already been touched on, Russia is an immense country and has so much potential. The boreal forests, the largest boreal forest area in the world, covering such high percentage of the countries, has such a potential for climate change mitigation, for being a carbon sink. And so that's a vast opportunity of applying nature-based solutions in those forests, complementing local strategies, building on local national strategies to really sort of lead the positive change that is what, that 37% globally, applying that to the Russian context and driving that forward. But also looking beyond the climate change into what is also the opportunities in relation to other sectors. We look at, if we look at the opportunities for forest landscape restoration, they're all on the forest and farm interface. So they're where you can use nature-based solutions to restore soil health, using regenerative agriculture, soil erosion, increasing soil organic mass, boosting soil biodiversity. And that's really helping, using nature to restore the functionality in agricultural lands, restoring land health, restoring land productivity. And that presents such a great opportunity of where there has been degraded soil, degraded land, and that's a global opportunity. So really positioning nature-based solutions across the different sectors in Russia provides a great framework to do that. So in doing so, in delivering this, I think there's 3 pillars of operational functionality: is understanding where nature-based solutions sits. It delivers those societal challenges. It delivers multiple benefits. There are other strategies, but we're focused down on understanding what nature-based is, on the planting of mangroves, reducing coastal flood damage, restoring watersheds, ensuring water regulation, etc. So really making sure that we are making sure that this is a do no harm, benefiting nature as well as benefiting as well as producing multiple benefits. And also seeing that, how does that link across with both complementary approaches? It's not just nature, it's building and working and functioning with grey infrastructure and natural infrastructure. So using a combination of both. So as IUCN, we've been working on a framework for operationalizing this MBS, and built and in the beginning of this year had final approval from our union, from our members, from a consultation process of over 800 experts across 100 countries, engaging with our 1,400 non-state and state members, of going through a facilitative process that's compatible with the ICL Alliance Code of Good Practice and links to other verification is supported by good practice from other verification systems, of setting 8 criteria and 28 indicators that is a framework for operationalizing and delivering MBS, starting with that key design at societal challenges, understanding what you're using nature for. What is it helping you deliver? Is it helping you restore biodiversity loss? Is it helping you regulate water? Understanding those challenges, designing it at a scale that is required to deliver those benefits, but also critically gives biodiversity net gain as economically feasible, has inclusivity in the decision-making process and in the design, and balances those trade-offs. Key critical land dynamics. Our landscapes are always changing. So what are those trade-offs between the local land managers, the public and private global goods that we need, and then being able to adapt and mainstream those strategies into a framework for delivering nature-based solutions. So where are we with that? We've developed the standard, we're rolling out, we're building the capacity of our membership, of our partners. We're working closely with multiple stakeholders in ensuring the standard is the key critical quality assurance process that really we are using nature, we're not abusing nature in these solutions. And then building up a governance and oversight to understand how this performance can be verified, how insurance and claims on nature-based solutions can be verified, and then finally also making sure we understand the impacts. What are the impacts against the SDGs? What are we delivering against, and making sure that we're tracking that suite of benefits that nature provides across a whole range of sectors and a whole range of opportunities. So there's a suite of information that we have available here. I'm sure that these slides will be made available afterwards to access more information on the standard, the global framing of nature-based solutions. And I'm really excited to hear more about the rest of the next hour on the real specifics on Russia, and hope that see that this context of the operational framework and the nature-based solutions standard helps our partners and the Russian government in delivering a real quality, impactful, nature-based solution orientated strategies. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and look forward to hearing from everybody else.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you also for highlighting as well the importance of nature-based solutions in relation to delivering on the SDGs. I think that's really critical. And also for highlighting as well, actually, that there is quite a vast amount of knowledge out there actually already. And when we talk of nature-based solutions, others might be talking about green infrastructure or ecosystems-based adaptation and mitigation, or ecosystems-based disaster risk reduction. So I think it's important to acknowledge the community of practice that exists out there, but then also how do we make sure that that knowledge then or the right people, the policymakers and the financiers are aware of the solutions that it can present. So I'd like to hand over now to Paul Sayers. Paul Sayers is a research fellow at the ODI, the Overseas Development Institute, and also director of Sayers and Partners, a consultancy which also actually works very closely with WWF. Paul, over to you.
Excellent, thanks Rebecca, and hello everyone. Really pleased to be here today, particularly as we are just starting a program with our Russian partners, EIPC, on investing in green infrastructure in Russia. So we're just at the start of that program, so this is a really timely meeting for us. And it's great to be following on from Lord Goldsmith and Chris. Some real synergies I'm sure we'll see through the day. So the rationale for this presentation is around infrastructure. We know there's a huge amount of infrastructure spend coming in the next 40 years in response to SDGs. And we know that nature-based solutions are widely promoted in lots of policies, in lots of guidance. And they have a real opportunity to be part of that infrastructure solution, in part of that response to the SDGs. But currently, we also know that their implementation is pretty limited, that nature-based responses are pretty limited. The go-to solution for that infrastructure response to deliver those SDGs remains pretty much conventional grey solutions. And one of the reasons for that is they're often perceived to and often incorrectly to be more effective, more efficient, easier to finance. So I think one of the things this presentation I'm trying to say is that in fact nature-based solutions are part of that solution. They are part of that contribution, and we really need to start challenging that perception to go to the grey conventional responses. So some examples. My background is primarily water, so the examples come from that water perspective. And working with WWF, one of the things we have been talking about is natural infrastructure as part of that infrastructure solution. And they cover a whole range of scales, big regional forests, as Chris was talking around, landscape connections in that natural infrastructure are important, as well as local sites and small scale responses. So a range of scales, and their terrestrial features, aquatic features, our aquifers, all of that is part of our natural infrastructure that can be a legitimate form of our infrastructure. It's not a separate thing, it's a legitimate component of that infrastructure response. And I thought I'd show a couple of examples. Been working a lot with the Chinese, and they've reconnected a large area of wetland back to their river in Hubei province, creating a large amount of new wetland storage, reducing flood risks. So restoring wetlands, inland wetlands is a well-known natural infrastructure response that is beginning to get some momentum. In New Orleans, I was there after Katrina, and I'm sure we all remember that. And one of the key reasons for Katrina was so devastating was the loss of the sediments to the delta. So sediment is also part of our natural infrastructure, and restoring our sediment supplies to our delta systems and having those natural buffers through those healthy deltas is again a key component of flood risk at the coast. There are examples of big responses. Small responses in our urban areas range from small swales little drainage channels, green drainage channels to green buildings. All of these have a contribution. So it's not just about the big, it's also about the small and connecting those. And I'd also thought I'd highlight this idea from the Netherlands that is using natural processes to reduce the carbon load of a normal activity. So they recharge their beaches with sand, and a huge amount to sustain their coastal defences, and that takes a huge amount of carbon effort to dredge the sand and pump the sand. But they've changed that. They've tried to use natural processes of the waves and the tides to distribute that sediment along the coast, and reducing both the costs and the carbon associated with that recharge activity. So the idea here is that nature-based solutions, we can think about them innovatively as well. They're slightly different things in different places. So natural infrastructure is legitimate infrastructure, as I was highlighting, but can we assess the benefits in comparable terms to allow that to be part of the same story? And I've just presented a couple of things. This is one from Jeff Opperman from WWF, but when he was at TNC, looking at hydropower by design. So if you're looking for hydropower, if you adopt a systems-based approach to that hydropower that includes the forest, includes the reconnection of the wetlands, you both can generate more power for longer from the conventional hydropower schemes, because you're managing sediments better, you're managing the water levels and hence the power generation better, but it also has huge benefits environmentally for flow connection, for connectivity of the ecosystems, for flood management. So if you move away from thinking about a single point reservoir hydropower station and think about it as a system, you both get better power, you get better flows, you get environmental connections, and you get better services. So that hydropower by design is a real move forward that still delivers what you need from a power perspective, but with a whole range of benefits. We just completed the UK climate change risk assessment, and I led the flood component of that, where we look at how flood risk might be managed through to the 2080s. And we consider a portfolio of responses, so conventional flood defences, property level measures, forecasting and warning. And this graph, although slightly complicated, is just trying to say on the y-axis here, this is the reduction in flood risk through adaptation in £1 million per year by the 2080s, and a 2 and a 4 degree future. And the yellow is, well, the grey, let's say the grey is if we continue to adapt as we are. The yellow is if we reduce our adaptation effort, and green is if we increase our adaptation effort. This is the contribution that conventional defences will make to that future risk, and they will be important. They will be important. But look at this. This is natural flood management. So natural flood management has a significant contribution to make to managing flood risk by the 2080s. That's almost £1 billion per year in the most ambitious adaptation effort for flood management by the 2080s. And we've also been doing that regionally. There's a major programme of development plan for the Oxford to Cambridge corridor. And we've been looking at how natural flood management as part of a portfolio response, what are the economic benefits that might provide in terms of flood risk reduction. And this is a map of the benefits by the 2050s under a 4 degree future. So how much risk might natural flood management, that's woods and buffer zones and surface storage, slow the flow by the 2050s under a 4 degree future. And there are some significant places that would benefit quite markedly, their flood risk reduced in economic terms from natural flood management. And that's by the 2050s. If we look to the 2080s, that increases again. So they become, natural flood management becomes a more significant contribution as we look to the future and under higher climate change. So that's casting the benefits in a comparable term to allow that natural infrastructure to be considered in the normal way and compared comparably with conventional responses. But the other question is mobilizing investment. And this is, again, some work I've done with Dave Tickner at WWF is looking at the investor universe. And there's a whole range of opportunities to mobilize investment. And it's very much about a blended investment response to support nature-based solutions. It's a multi-investor potential. And we do now have these tools. Some exist and some are emerging to quantify the benefits. So we have the investment opportunity, we have the means of quantifying the benefits, and there's loads of approaches to calculate those benefits, from payment ecosystem services, the offset of carbon offsets and compensation, etc. So we know how to do the benefits. We know how we've got a universe of funders with the potential. So what's the problem? And here's the concluding couple of comments. I would say it's clear. Everyone, I think, is clear that there's a real opportunity for climate mitigation and adaptation from nature-based approaches. We know they've been promoted in policy for some time. And we know from a wide range of investors, there's a really strong and growing will to transition that policy to action. And there are some tools available to help us. So why is it not happening? And I think that to really make it happening, there are two things we need to move towards much more quickly. And that's whole system planning approaches that connect the upstream and the downstream, the conventional and the natural. So it's whole system planning approaches, and increasingly be willing to accept innovation and collaborative solutions. Now that is easy to say, but much more difficult to do, and it really requires everyone to break free, as we call it in a European project I've been involved in, is break free of their silos and look outside of just that one problem and think, how can we collaborate to provide a much more rounded whole system solution? And as Chris mentioned, I'm sure the slides will be available after, and here are some connections to the various projects that ODI have been involved with and are involved with around nature-based solutions. Well, thank you. Hope that was.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you also for really highlighting that really important point about the need to take much more of a systems resilience perspective. I think one of the challenges, as you say, is that we do need to break down those silos, but how we do that is certainly a challenge. But I think also you made clear that actually the economic benefits of nature-based solutions are not just hypothetical, and actually there is some real investment opportunities available there as well. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to hand over to Vladimir Moshkalo, who is the country director for UNEP. And Vladimir is going to, I think, bring us to more of a focus with the Russia context. Vladimir, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Excellencies, distinguished guest colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the UK Embassy for inviting me to take part in this interesting webinar dedicated to the nature-based solutions and present UNEP's activities. We are facing a planetary emergency for climate, nature, and humanity. Unsustainable human activities from farming and mining to industry and infrastructure are undermining the productivity of vast areas of farmland, forests, and other ecosystems. This degradation threatens food security, water supplies, and the biodiversity upon which human development depends. It drives and is exacerbated by the climate crisis. We have only 10 years left to bend the curve on climate change and halt biodiversity loss before impacts on human beings become dramatic. There are no quick technical fixes to solve the climate emergency and our overexploitation of natural resources, but we do have nature with its immense restorative power and some of the most cost-effective climate solutions. By working with nature, we have the potential to reduce emissions by more than a third of what is needed by 2030. But we must start right now. Without nature, we won't be able to achieve 1.5 degrees centigrade or net zero emissions by mid-century, nor will we achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. What is required is an urgent, massive investment effort to conserve and restore biodiversity and ecosystems, and drastic change in the way we interact with and depend on nature to unlock its full potential. In other words, we need to explore and invest in what nature does best, that is self-healing, and we call this nature-based solution. With a number of definitions of nature-based solution have been proposed, none has been universally adopted. Chris already shown you definition of nature-based solution by IUCN that was adopted in 2016 by the World Conservation Congress. European Union defines nature-based solutions as solutions that are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective, simultaneously provide environmental, social, and economic benefits, and help build resilience. Such solutions bring more and more diverse nature and nature features and process into cities, landscapes, and seascapes through locally adapted, resource-efficient, and systematic interventions. The lack of agreement on definition may not be surprising, given the range of objectives, because there is not a consensus as to what constitutes a nature-based solution. There is sometimes disagreement among advocates as to what deserves the designation and which approaches are best in particular circumstances. Ongoing work on nature-based solution might adopt one of the many existing definitions of the term, combine elements of two or more, or develop a new definition. What actually is more important than the definition per se is that the objectives of the nature-based solution be clarified. What are the problems nature-based solution I intend to solve? Merely listing desiderata that nature-based solutions should mitigate and adapt to climate change, preserve biodiversity, provide local ecosystem services, promote resilient ecological and human communities, enhance equity and participation, etc., is not sufficient, as some of these criteria inevitably come into conflict. There may be no strictly scientific way in which to reconcile competing objectives, but clarifying and prioritizing objective is essential if nature-based solution is to be an operationally useful concept. So nature-based solutions, it's solutions that are systematic, thinking about the whole, not just the parts, locally adapted, one size does not fit all, resilient, planning long-term, understanding change, resource efficient, so 3 R's, reducing, reusing, recycling, and have multiple benefits, economic, environmental, and social. The United Nations Environment Programme works from the ground up with small communities and at the highest level to shift our relationship with nature and help provide sustainable solution to our unfolding climate crisis. At present, UNEP is working in 4 main areas to implement nature-based solutions. The first is reforestation and forestation programs, particularly in tropical regions, to reduce land degradation while soaking up carbon. By doing so, UNEP is helping raise awareness about supporting biodiversity and contributing to tree planting initiatives and climate-smart agriculture. The UNEP also works with the Food and Agricultural Programme of the United Nations and the United Nations Development Programme in implementing the UN RED program on reducing emissions from forest degradation. Second, UNEP is helping countries define, implement, and monitor their national biodiversity action plans and plan ecosystem-based adaptation to climate change. Third, along with the International Union for Conservation of Nature and the FAO, UNEP leads the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration in 2021, next year up to 2030, to expand the use of agroecological farming process. And finally, UNEP has developed an ambitious partnership, Adapt with Nature, designed to scale up the use of nature-based solutions that enable us to adapt to climate change. At the global level, nature-based solution emerged last year from the Climate Action Summit with strong political support. UNEP was tasked by the Secretary General to secure follow-up of the nature-based solution track in order to raise the profile of nature-based solution in global events leading up to United Nations Environment Assembly 5th session in 2021. A global UNEP task team has been set up to exchange and work jointly on unifying the nature-based solution narrative and advance a systematic nature-based solution and aligning nature-based solution processes. UNEP seeks to establish a specific program on nature-based solution in the pan-European region to articulate with the global approach, feeding it with knowledge and lessons learned from concrete actions. Geographically, such a program will also help connect operationally with different initiatives and approaches that stakeholders in the European region are already developing and will consistently strengthen in the forthcoming years. However, what is currently missing from these various work streams is a convening power which would harmonize all the fragmented yet interrelated initiatives into one cohesive program, making use of UNEP's mandate to expertise to provide a solid structure. This program would consist of three basic components. First component, it's scientific expertise and exchange. So we'll be focused on collecting data, advancing research, and creating evaluation mechanisms to integrate nature-based solutions at the national level. This also includes creating teaching materials and organizing training courses. Component two, building action-oriented partnership for nature-based solution to advance the narrative on nature-based solution in order to integrate its concept into national and regional development programs. And component three, just to support this partnership with substance, UNEP will build targeted projects applying nature-based solution in different parts of the European region. So this is demonstration project. Currently, UNEP has in Europe developed a number of project proposals. It has some project ideas, and they include proposal for nature-based solution for urban development in Serbia and Belgrade. The same proposal for Turkey. We are discussing project on a coastal restoration and wetland conservation in the Caspian region, including, of course, Caspian region of Russia. And the third one, it's starting from the project, but we hope to develop an initiative on ecological connectivity and nature-based conservation in the European region. I will speak about this initiative in more details. So UNEP Europe Office is currently exploring possibility to launch this initiative, and also this initiative would be part of the evolving strategy on nature-based solution that UNEP Europe Office is drafting right now. This initiative is intended to connect vulnerable ecosystem in the pan-European region, eventually expanding to connect green spaces in urban settings to ensure ecological connectivity and sustainable ecosystem management as part of the nature-based solution narrative. As the overall objective of the project, it is envisaged to establish a platform on ecological connectivity and nature-based solution to gather stakeholders already working in the various thematic fields and launch a dialogue on best practices, lessons learned, and particular needs. In the framework of the platform, awareness raising and trainings, as well as exchange of knowledge and experience, will be organized. In the longer term, it is envisaged that the platform will design a strategy in partnership with governments and other stakeholders to build ecological connectivity in Europe. Following the scientific assessment and further elaboration of the thematic and geographic connectivity angle, a regional stakeholder consultation meeting will be held to convene the different stakeholders working in the ecosystem field, defining the specific challenges faced by each area and exchanging views on how to contribute to their solution best practices from each region. Actually, this slide shows different priorities in European regions. I won't be naming them, but if you would be interested, I can share with you later. Just this shows the diverse, situations in different parts of our region. The work stream in pan-European region could focus on the following priority areas. It's ecosystem management and conservation, including afforestation and deforestation, as well as restoration of wetlands, peatlands. Then another direction is green cities, including expansion of green urban spaces, urban agriculture, biomimicry in buildings, agriculture and food systems, including plant breeding, the use of perennial grasses on farms to prevent runoff, etc. And industry, manufacturing, and infrastructure, including conservation of plant material to biofuel and the compression of plant material for use in the production of biodegradable packaging to replace plastic. How we are planning to put forward this initiative, so the timeline. The theme of upcoming fifth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is actually the main ruling body of UNEP, which is planned next year, will be strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. UNEP 5 is expected to mobilize, motivate, and energize our member states and stakeholders into sharing and implementing successful approaches and nature-based solutions that contribute to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the eradication of poverty and the promotion of sustainable patterns of consumption and production. The next year, with a number of key gatherings, including UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, United Nations Environment Assembly, and other, presents a unique opportunity to bring nature into development, biodiversity, and climate solution at an unprecedented scale. Nation will set out new ambitions to stop biodiversity loss and demonstrate climate commitments to meet the Paris Agreement. Ensuring nature is central to green recovery efforts is also crucial, and nature-based solutions are crucial to achieve sustainable development goals. Next year really would be crucial year. You see a number, not all, of gathering that should develop further policy till 2030. For us, it is of utmost important because I mentioned that UNEP, together with Food and Agriculture Organization and IUCN, is tasked to promote coordinate activity of the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, and we are planning to launch this initiative on the 5th of June. So it's World Environment Day. Currently, the theme of the World Environment Day, as I mentioned, is already set, but host country has not been selected yet. So that's all that I wanted to share with you. And if you will have any question, I'm ready to answer. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, and thank you very much as well for highlighting the importance of the UN decade for ecosystems restoration. As you say, next year is going to be a very critical year for the planet. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Sergei Karadkov, Director of UNIDO Center for International Industrial Cooperation, to share his presentation with us. Sergei, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rebecca. First of all, I also would like to thank for the invitation, British Embassy, for the invitation to participate in this conference. It is a very interesting issue because for UNIDO, naturally based solutions, naturally based technologies, it's one of the priorities for the development of the industry 4.0. And of course, here in Russia, we're also involved in this process because some years ago, initiative from the director of Kurchatov National Research Center was based especially for the development of naturally based technologies, naturally based solutions. This initiative is in accordance with the Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, UN Agenda. And just a moment, let me see. How can I? Sorry. I would like to open the presentation. You can see in this slide, what we indicated for the Agenda 2030. It is UN Sustainable Development Goals, and of course the establishment of the new industry with the new technological conversion of naturally liked solutions is one of the priorities for UNIDO. UNIDO vision of such issue is based on the concept of the inclusive and sustainable industrial development, ISID. It was proclaimed as one of the main aims of UNIDO. You can see here 2015, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, he has a speech in the United Nations General Assembly, and one part of his speech was dedicated environmental problems, ecology. And as you see, also he mentioned that it is necessary to develop naturally based solutions for the future of industry. You know, usually when I talk about the naturally based solutions for industry, I refer to the very famous movie which is called Avatar by Cameron, and you could see in this movie two civilizations. One civilization based on the very close development with nature, and the other one industry which tried to broke these natural rules. And of course, you could see what was the result of such war. Anyway, for the future of humanity in our planet, I guess naturally based solutions, naturally based technologies for the future of industry, it is the vital decision and vital item to be developed. In the UNIDO concept, you can see such tasks like efficient dissemination of technological information regarding to the nature-based solutions, national sustainable development goals, competitiveness in global markets, and technological safety. All these issues, they link with each other very closely. In one of the documents, our center was mentioned together with National Research Center Kurchatov Institute for the work for the dissemination of this concept integration of naturally based solutions, naturally based technologies to the industry. What was achieved for the recent years? In 2018, we had a global forum on naturally based and convergent technologies. It was arranged by the government of Russia, Ministry of Industry of Russia, UNIDO, and Kurchatov Institute. 500 people took part in this forum, and it was discussed a lot of issues according to the item. Really, it was very interesting. And as a result, UNIDO issued the report about this forum, and they mentioned the main topics of the forum with the description of each topics. There were a lot of participants, most of them from Russia, but UNIDO invited a lot of participants from foreign countries with their attitude, and they shared their vision for the naturally based solutions, naturally based technologies. To our understanding, the new industrial revolution 4.0 closely linked with the naturally based solutions. You know that ecological pollution now all over the world is very, very hard. I mean plastic pollution, I mean CO2 and other gases emissions. So I think that introduction of naturally based technologies to the industry would avoid the humanity and stop the ecological pollution. Current status of this initiative due to the pandemic situation now a little bit in hold on situation because the second forum was planned September this year, but due to this pandemic situation, unfortunately, we could not arrange and provide it. But for the future, I think now we can more share auditory of this forum due to your conference, also to your webinar. We can invite all the participants when this forum will be organized. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to respond to any kind of questions. Thank you. Again.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you for sharing that with us. Victoria, could I turn to you now? We've heard from other speakers about some of the work that WWF's been doing in other countries, but I think you're going to share with us some of the experience on the ground in Russia. We are a little tight for time, apologies, but over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon already, dear colleagues. Still morning in the UK. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. I'll try to skip a little bit of general things on principles and theory and approaches, because I think those were covered very well by previous speakers today, and thanks a lot for the presentations. But it's obvious that the planet is in a crisis and the nature is not recovering itself as fast as it should do if we wouldn't be on the way. And you might have seen all this this picture from Nature a couple of years ago, demonstrating, highlighting where the last wilderness remains on Earth. And that's absolutely obvious and clear that Russia is among those who is responsible to conserve its ecosystems and species, but also to use nature-based solutions, let me say NBS, to ensure restoration and further development of the ecosystems and people thriving together. Just a few words. Here in Russia, WWF works in priority ecoregions, but we also work from here hosting the Central Asian program in 5 Central Asian countries, so it's Northern Eurasia. You can see our priority species very often, those are tops of food pyramids or large herbivores constructing or actually formatting landscapes. And for that, to ensure their conservation, we would need to ensure the health, let me say like that, of the whole ecosystems. The areas of work, the topics, the themes or strategies include working with people and businesses, ensuring sustainable forestry and fishery, addressing climate change and going to sustainable energy, green economy and governance are also among those. And we are present at 8 offices in Russia, and we have opened an office in Almaty this year, just to give you a little bit sense and taste of the scale of our work. About the highlights, those also contributing to the restoration and to the ecosystem and people well-being. We have managed over these years to ensure the actually the restoration of forest and leopard from almost extinct population of 30 or even less than 30 animals to now 118 and growing. Similar for tiger, there is a stable growth, and there are absolutely great partners established in Russia, organizations that took over much of work, and we are continuing working here. European bison was brought back to Russia because it was extinct, actually killed out of the country after the Second World War. Forest and fish all was a little bit described today. So I just would like to mention that over these years we have helped to establish about 170 protected areas altogether, covering the territory of Spain and Iceland. And you can see here our contribution to this process in green line and blue without WWF contribution. All this helped Russia to be actually among the leaders on the Aichi targets, and 13% of the Russian territory is now covered terrestrial by protected areas, but only 4 by marine, and it's much to do further. Being cautious of time and also with respect to what has been already presented, I would try to give you just 4 examples of our work, because it's very interesting how to apply all those principles and great ideas and plans to the reality on the ground. And those projects are of different scale. And let me start, please, with the Russian forest, Bikin River, the very important habitat for Amur tiger, but also the homeland for indigenous people with traditional lifestyles, Udege people. And this is the largest intact carnivorous broadleaf forest massif also there. So several years ago, with the support of the International Climate Initiative of German government, we have started projects that helped us to first ensure the concession, or if you may call it rent, of the territory by the indigenous community, by the commune Tiger. Project supported that financially and by capacity, and they have rented this territory, not all of their area, but 160,000 hectares for 49 years for non-timber forest use. At the same time, the same area was leased to a company for clear cutting. So we had quite a campaign, and we had quite an interesting period of time to ensure that the forest would not be cut. At the same time, a joint implementation project, the first forest climate project in Russia, was designed, and using the carbon credits via the partner, we have ensured another additional 17 million of rubles coming to the community for their sustainable development, for their needs, for their constructions and maintenance, and so on and so forth. And later on, also understanding that carbon credits would not bring all the necessary funding while the area is so important, we have managed to establish a national park there. But this is a very special national park. It's much larger than initial territory. At the same time, it has special regulations that allow all traditional lifestyles implementation for indigenous people there. So they can continue hunting and harvesting there, and they live there in this territory, and they are partners for conservation. Another example, I'm rushing a little bit fast, but sorry, that's the time. This much smaller scale, northwest of Russia, salmon rivers of Kola Peninsula and Karelia Republic, River Varzuga. Absolutely unique situation when the whole bank of this river, very important salmon river there, was turned into desert. It's a real desertification in the Arctic. And the village there on the bank of this river was almost under the threat to be destroyed and had no way for the future. So that was due to climate change and unsustainable way of living there. And within the local community, within the project that we run there, we have managed to start fixing the situation, to develop a methodology of sand fixation, to start planting trees there. And what is most important is that local community and local authorities took over the whole initiative and the project. We actually phased out from there a couple of years ago already, and the project continues. It will take years, it will take decades to restore the ecosystem. But that's the reality for conservation, for salmon and for people, and also for the economic development. Another example from Karelia, small rivers there, important habitats for Atlantic salmon. They were full of old logs and all this stuff, rubbish remaining from the period when the logging operations and the logging transportation was done in this way. Again, it's a hard to reach location, but with the project, together with the communities, we have managed to develop the methodology and clean Letnaya River, restore spawning areas for salmon, and the project continues. There is a contribution from local government, which is extremely important for these two projects. Small but financial support, so co-funding from the local authorities plays a significant role, because this is also a kind of responsibility for the sustainability of the project. New initiative, you're very welcome to consider and probably even considering joining this. This is Arkhangelsk region, and it was already mentioned today by colleagues that Russian boreal forest is so important carbon storage. It's a mitigation, but also adaptation. We have launched recently an initiative, Sustainable Landscape Stewardship Initiative in the area of two rivers, Dvina and Pinigar. This is a logging area. At the same time, there are high conservation value forests there identified. We are in partnership with FSC offices, international and Russia. We built partnership with businesses, with logging companies there, but there are also local people living in the area. So they need jobs, they need other opportunities for the development, they need alternative livelihoods approach. This is an important carbon storage, so we need to use adaptation, we need low carbon practices for the timber. Altogether, the desired budget for next 4 years is about 8 million, it's about €1.5 million. The territory is 8 million hectares. There is a forest reindeer living there. There are some small villages. It's a great, attractive place. There are responsible partners there. We are planning to establish more green jobs, which is also among nature-based solutions approach. There are other opportunities for development. Research is involved also, not only from Russia, but abroad. And this is something we can do together if you are interested to join and do something practically in Russia. Last but not least, the Arctic. There is an upcoming Russian presidency or chairmanship, or chairship now, it's better to say, in the Arctic for the next 2 years. But not only, not because of that, but because of the responsibility and interest to the region. WWF, actually WWF Russia launched the special project on identification of key conservation areas. I underline, it's conservation, it's not specially protected. So various regimes, various management. Together with the partners from Circum-Arctic scale, involving best experts from the science, we have identified and now we are developing and promoting this project, presenting that at various levels, where at the map you can see the most important areas for sustainable management and conservation while developing the Arctic. What we are doing, just giving you quick examples, Barents Sea, working with fishermen. There are vulnerable marine habitats there, ecosystems that are threatened by bottom trawling. And the group of fisheries from the Barents have established a coordination council together with us. And they have taken voluntary obligations to avoid those territories. We are not going to establish protected areas there. There are other measures using the sustainability approach and using the NBS as a principle to ensure that those habitats will survive. The southeast of the Barents Sea in Russia, it's called Pechora Sea. We are developing integrated marine management plan there. Voluntary now. There is no obligatory framework in Russia, mandatory framework in Russia for that. But that involves various nature users, including businesses, including oil and gas companies, shipping, local communities, fishermen. And we are on halfway. There are various priorities and interests already mapped and identified, so we will continue doing that. Last but not least, work with communities, adaptation, conservation of ecosystems where people live is impossible without people. That has been highlighted today several times. We are working on Chukotka, for example, with local communities to establish brigades, so-called polar bear patrols. And you have seen from the news last years how many polar bears are now coming to villages. And there are various reasons for that, starting with the climate change, but also unsustainable ways of living there, garbage, landfills, many other things. So those brigades protect people from bears and bears from people, and that works well. We are supporting traditional lifestyles there because without such partnerships, without support to people who live there in nature for generations, it's impossible to practically or theoretically ensure conservation and ensure sustainable use and restoration of our ecosystems and of our unique nature that really helps us to survive at this planet. I think we have interesting way ahead now, and next 2 years will be probably very much opening new opportunities for the work in the Arctic, both for restoration. Peatlands were already mentioned today. Wetlands in the Russian Arctic are incredibly important. I'm not even touching the issues of the various hydrocarbons and so on and so forth. So the way forward, where to go? All these principles, again, were mentioned today, and I think those principles are core for our projects. Wherever we work, restoring high altitude forests in Altai, because they were damaged by fires and extreme weather events, or building together some partnerships with people in the Kola Peninsula to restore rivers and to bring salmon back there. Look at Kamchatka, what is happening there, what was happening there. The catastrophe we all were thinking are really caused by the industrial accidents, and now basically proved that this was a red tide. We don't know what really was the reason for red tide, whether it was just the whether it was climate change and other global processes, or there were also some wrong, let's say, behavior of humans there. But one way or another, we need to address these things. So the way forward is only together with stakeholders, building alliances, bringing responsible investments, developing green finance, green jobs, actually coping with this current situation of COVID-19. But I'm absolutely sure, and I'm absolutely convinced that together that's possible. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to work together with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thanks very much as well for reminding us actually as well that nature-based solutions offer us a real opportunity to sort of harness thousands of years of human experience engaging and working with nature. And actually that's what is truly inspirational and exciting, and also gives us some hope when we think about what role they can play in tackling the climate crisis. Sadly, we're almost at the end of the session today, and we don't have time for questions, I'm afraid. But what I would like to do is turn to Lord Goldsmith just to get his reflections on today's session before handing back to the Ambassador for her concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you for moderating this fascinating event and fascinating discussion. And thanks to everyone for taking part. All the speakers have made just such a huge range of valuable suggestions, points, examples. And what's clear is that there is a really wide range of nature-based solutions at our disposal. And for every part of the world, there's going to be a different nature-based solution, necessarily so. But what's also clear is that the benefits of nature-based solutions are so broad. There's an ugly term that economists use. They talk about solution multipliers. But that's exactly what nature-based solutions are. You invest in nature, and there are so many different solutions that then flow from that, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it's mitigating climate change or adapting to climate change, whether it's regulating water to minimize the risk of floods or to hold water for longer during periods of drought. They just go on. And it feels to me that in this world where there's always a pressure on resources, always a pressure on finance, always limited bandwidth, the case for choosing that solution which delivers the biggest possible range of benefits and quantity of benefits the case is so strong. And it feels to me that while we've seen huge progress on climate change and carbon reduction, nature has been largely ignored. It takes up such a small fraction of the overall climate agenda. And that's got to change. Nature and climate change are one and the same thing. In a sense, climate change is nature developing a fever on the back of the abuse that it's been subjected to for all these years. You cannot separate the two. There is no pathway to tackling climate change which doesn't involve protecting and restoring nature on really a massive scale. As I said in my opening remarks, the UK is raising its game. We're increasing our contribution financially. We're putting a lot of energy into this issue domestically and internationally. We're making climate the focal point of all of our international engagements. But the only way that we're going to get to where we need to get to is through international cooperation. And as I said earlier on, the role for Russia is just potentially so huge, so defining, that I would love us to continue to think about opportunities where the UK can work much more closely with Russia on this agenda. So if people have suggestions following this session as to how you think we might do that and where you think the opportunities for collaboration are, please do be in touch with me and my colleagues on this call. There's really nothing more important. And in 30, 40, 50 years' time, people will not be looking back at most of the issues that we're grappling with in day-to-day politics today. They'll be looking at how we reacted to this life-defining, species-defining challenge that we're discussing today. And it's on that basis that I hope and believe that politicians and everyone will be judged by generations to come. So thank you so much for all the inspiring work that you're doing. Thank you so much for the information, advice, examples that you just provided. But please don't let it end there. If there are areas where you think we can work together, areas where you think the UK can work even more closely with Russia, on this incredibly important issue, please do let me know. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lord Goldsmith. And apologies as well to participants for not having time to ask questions, but actually please do feel free to get in touch with the speakers directly or contact Tom Heaps at fcdo.gov.uk, and Tom will put you in touch with the speakers. I'd now like to hand over to the Ambassador for her wrap-up remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I'd like to echo Lord Goldsmith's thanks to all the panelists and all the participants for today's really interesting and enriching discussion. And I think we've all learned a lot and been really inspired, and perhaps particular thanks to Lord Goldsmith for his time and for his challenge to all of us. And I'm really hoping that you will be able to come to Russia, because although it's great doing all these things online, I think we're all missing actually meeting in person. So hopefully that will be able to happen, and you might be able to see some of these amazing projects which are going on across Russia. I think, you know, today's event has really highlighted the huge potential for nature-based solutions in Russia, building on what is already happening and the great experience here. I think it's also highlighted the potential for working together on this shared challenge. If I can, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to all the speakers and participants over this couple of weeks of events, year to COP26. Of course, things don't stop here. This is something that we all need to work on. We all need to work together on. You can see recordings of these sessions on the British Embassy's social media account, or you will be able to soon see them because we'll obviously have to upload today. But please do, we're on Vkontakte, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, Instagram, all of these, we'll reshare them. COP26 is now less than a year away, and time is really moving quickly. Action on climate change cannot wait. So picking up what Lord Goldsmith said, I think it's really important that we decide that we are the generation that will be remembered for fixing this problem and deserving of the gratitude of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the way that this year in particular, the 75th anniversary of the ending of the Second World War, we are remembering the great sacrifices of previous generations. I think the great challenge for our generation is to really act now so that we can earn the gratitude of future generations for the actions that we are prepared to take for ourselves, but also for them. Thanks very much to everybody.
Thank you very much. That concludes the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
See you soon. See you in Moscow.